Hey everyone, Jamie Purvis here for DevilsDigest.com with the publisher Hod Rabino after their 30-17 victory over Oregon State. Now let's talk about the game in general. They had a rough beginning, rough middle, rough end, but they obviously had the victory. Just talk about their performance in general.
Yeah, I think it was a little disappointing because they had obviously a rough outing also last week against Utah, and you take it so much with a grain of salt because Utah is a very tough place to play at. Stanford lost over there, Oregon State and UCLA barely won over there. But coming back home, not only was Arizona State undefeated at home, but it seemed like every win they had was at least 4 or 5 touchdown margin. So it was a little surprising, maybe even disappointing, to see Arizona State start out with 2 interceptions in the first half the first quarter by Taylor Kelly, and the offense only scoring 20 points, missing on a lot of opportunities. Offense was shut out in the third quarter, so there were definitely some turnovers. And Oregon State, luckily for Arizona State, really shot themselves in the foot more with turnovers and penalties of their own to go ahead and help Arizona State to victory. But this is a victory that is definitely going to win any style points. Maybe Arizona State was a little too tight thinking about the game ahead next week against UCLA. So not a great performance by the offense or the defense, but they definitely did enough to go ahead and come away with a victory.
Taylor Kelly had 183 yards tonight, 2 interceptions. In the second game, he hasn't had a touchdown. And then Marion Grice had a good game. Coming off the past 2 games, he didn't have a touchdown. Tonight he had 2. And just talk about that.
Well, I think with Taylor Kelly was interesting because he really started out on fire. He was 4 passing. All the passes went to Jalen Strong, a player he wanted to see bounce back from that ankle injury after having 3 subpar games in previous weeks. And after that first drive, Taylor Kelly was really almost non-existent for the rest of the game. And like you said, Marion Grice picked up the slack scoring after not scoring in the last 2 games. So that was good to see. Arizona State is really priding itself on a balanced offensive attack. And I don't feel they got that much support from Kelly in the passing game all throughout the game. Again, they were lucky enough to go ahead and come away with a victory just because their defense did play, at least at times, played strong enough to go ahead and force their will against Oregon State. And obviously Marion Grice on the ground definitely had one of his better games of the season, so that really helped. But yeah, just a little concerning to see the Arizona State offense, especially in the passing game, really sputter all night long. And Oregon State, you look at the defensive stats coming into this game, they're not one of the juggernauts in the Pac-12 when it comes to those categories. So that was surprising in a very negative way.
And the defense had a really strong half, but they were shut out in the third. Just talk about their performance.
Yeah, the defense, I mean, they were able to go ahead and force 4 interceptions for Sean Mannion, so that was a good thing. But in the third quarter, it looked like just a total different defense, and really in the negative way. After holding Oregon State only for 3 points, and the 3 points Oregon State got was a very late field goal in the second quarter. The defense really let that Sean Mannion, Brandon Cooks connection, which was non-existent in the first half, really start to connect in the second half. But again, like I mentioned earlier, Sean Mannion's interception came back to bite him. Obviously, the pick 6 at the very latter stages of the game by Robert Nelson, that pretty much sealed the deal. And the Mannion-Cooks connection really did not click all that well in the second half. And like I said, in the first half, it didn't pose any problems for Arizona State. So that was, again, an up-and-down performance for the defense, just like it was for the offense. But they did enough in the end to go ahead and win the game.
And Oregon State had 5 turnovers tonight, which was pretty painful for themselves. They also killed themselves with the penalties that they had. Yeah,
and it was really, I guess disappointing for them. When you come off a bye week, sometimes you really don't know what to expect. And Arizona State was probably expecting a lot of the unexpected from Oregon State. But that's maybe one thing that Arizona State was not expecting all that much, because Oregon State's offense, being explosive as it has been all throughout the year, is obviously not a team that shoots itself in the foot with turnovers and with penalties. And luckily for Arizona State, that definitely manifested itself in a major way. But I think also in a lot of ways the defense did force their will on Oregon State, so that's where the turnovers come in. That's probably where the frustration comes in with leads to penalties. I believe Oregon State had at least 2 personal fouls, maybe even 3, and Arizona State was able to go ahead and capitalize on that. Just kind of interesting. how maybe 2-3 years ago we're talking about Arizona State's teams, which did exactly what Oregon State did right now, in a position to go ahead and get back into the game, and just foolish turnovers and foolish penalties really shot themselves in the foot.
And as you mentioned, ASU had all their wins with pretty big margins, but tonight was a little bit smaller of a margin. Just talk about the low scoring.
Yeah, I think basically the offense, like I said, they scored 20 points in the first half. Wasn't even that much clean of a game because up to that point, because again, Taylor Kelly did have the 2 interceptions in the first quarter, but at least I felt that overall they played okay. But really disconcerting to see themselves coming out that flat in the third quarter. It's not like they had a monumental lead going into halftime. And even in games earlier this year against USC, against Washington, against Colorado, where Arizona State had an enormous lead going into halftime, they still were able to go ahead and still put their foot on the pedal in the third quarter and really go ahead and just widen the margin that much and not let the team in back into the game. And Arizona State did that in the third quarter, and that was really unfortunate. I mean, again, the miscues by the Beavers helped Arizona State's subpar, or I should say negated Arizona State's subpar performance on that. So, but I think that's something that Arizona State's going to look at close and hard. I mean, I know the game film session last week against Utah, after the Utah game, was not that pretty, and I think it might be even uglier, so to speak, after watching this win against Oregon State. Like I said, no style points whatsoever, but you're not going to complain about wins, especially in November.
And looking forward to UCLA next week. That's going to be a big game for them. Just talk about what they need to improve on in order to beat them.
Yeah, I think UCLA, just like Arizona State, is not really playing as sharp as the last couple of weeks, so maybe that's somewhat of a comforting thought to Arizona State, that they're not playing, a red-hot team that's just blowing other opponents out of the water. But this is the showdown everybody thought, even back in July and August, that's going to go ahead and define the Pac-12 South crown. And sure enough, here we are, just under a week before that game, seeing that materialize in front of our eyes. Arizona State is really going to have to clean up just everything, really. I mean, offense and defense, and even special teams, to some extent. I think just seeing a more consistent effort all across the board. I mean, again, the win against Utah, I wasn't too concerned about the performance that much. I really felt they would bounce back in a major way against Oregon State, and I don't feel that they did that all that well today. So it's really hard to say what kind of Arizona State team is going to come out the next week, but I think you can say something about UCLA because their wins against Washington on Friday, and the week before that in Tucson against U of A did not have a lot of style points themselves. So I think both teams are really trying to go ahead and display much better than they did in the last couple of weeks. But I think that if Arizona State just sticks to the same recipe that they have, just no turnovers, no penalties, and having the balanced offense between the pass game and the run game, I think they should come out victorious in this game. And we'll see. I mean, it was definitely the last 2 years, 2 bitter losses that Arizona State suffered by UCLA. It was field goals and late game drives. Maybe it's time that the fortunes do turn their way.
I sure hope so. Jimmy Purvis here for DevilsDigest.com with Hod Rabino.